everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let's Do Lunch. Today is Tuesday, which is our Future of Entertainment Day. We have a terrific show for you today. Before I introduce our panel, let me remind folks that we have our chat open, and we do welcome your comments in the chat as well as your introductions. So please feel free to introduce yourself. We'd love to hear who is here today. And when you do that in the chat, make sure to change the drop down from all panelists to all panelists and attendees, just like Simon just did, so that everybody will see your posts. Also, if you have questions for the panel, please put them in the Q&A area, which is just to the left of the chat on the bottom nav. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can today. As I mentioned, we have a fantastic show, and I have to thank our friends at Grant Thornton for sponsoring and putting this panel together today. The topic is to examine how new business models fueled by technology are transforming the media and entertainment industry. I'm Ned Sherman. I'm partner at Manat, Phelps & Phillips and co-founder of Digital Media Wire. I'll be introducing our panelists, and then I'll be turning off my video and letting the panel go until 45 past or 50 past at the latest. So without further ado, please welcome Deborah Newman, Media and Entertainment National Industry Leader, Grant Thornton. Welcome, Deborah. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, everybody.
Great to have you on the show. Please welcome Moen Haig, SVP of Architecture and Engineering at the Warner Music Group. Welcome, Moen.
Thank you.
Please welcome Howard Hominoff. Howard is a media industry general counsel, a Forbes contributing writer, and adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yep. And our moderator for today's show is Sumit Grover. He is SVP and Business Head Cable, Media, and Entertainment Leader at Tech Mahindra. Welcome, Sumit.
Thank you, Ned.
Yep. Have a great show, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ned, for your kind introduction and setting up the stage. I would like to add my welcome to the Future of Entertainment talk. As Ned said, my name is Sumit Grover, and I lead Tech Mahindra's cable, media, and entertainment business here in the US. And we are honored to be here talking about issues that matter the most. Good day, everybody. I hope you and all yours at home and work are safe and healthy. I'll be your moderator for today's amazing session. And with us are three very distinguished thought leaders of our media and entertainment world. It gives me great pleasure and deep sense of honor to moderate such an exciting panel this afternoon. Special thanks to Digital Media Wire's Let's Do Lunch series for keeping up with the tradition and getting us all together here talking about a topic that most of us would have discussed at home this past year. The future of entertainment. Or let's think about it for a second. Is it the future of entertainment or entertainment of the future? This is the power of our topic for you today. You can interchangeably use future and entertainment and still get some very exciting conversation going. For this, I'm thrilled to have these eminent panelists with us, and I can't wait to hear from them. Thank you, Moen, Howard, and Deborah for joining us. I believe we can all agree that 2020 has clearly redefined on how we consume entertainment. What we saw is the acceleration of the trends that we all knew were underway. While customer acquisition for streaming content was the hottest trend, soon we saw customer churn became the trendsetter towards the second half. Like many other businesses, our cable, media, and entertainment sector also got impacted immensely. Thanks to the new Chief Digital Officer we all have in common now. You guessed it right. The name of this Chief Digital Officer is the unpopular COVID-19. Looking ahead, the sweeping restructuring across already announced by many media majors will take hold throughout the industry, as we all know. From esports to virtual live events, from shopping to education. This past year saw the art of the possible with new screens powered by AR, VR, and many other immersive technologies. What seemed like a scene from a sci-fi movie is fast becoming a science reality now. Not to forget the new business models where many of us enjoyed the newly released titles in the comfort of our home theaters. Who would have thought that would become a reality in 2020? I hope when we look back at the recorded version of today's session in 2031, we will get many such, aha, I told you so, or damn it, how could we not see this coming moments. Regardless of that, let's dive right into the future of entertainment, knowing our panelists a bit and hearing their perspectives. My first panelist today is a dear friend and M&E industry's most partner-friendly executive, Deborah Newman, popularly known as Debbie. Debbie's Grant Thornton's media and entertainment industry leader and has worked with some of the largest and most transformative companies in the world. Welcome, Debbie, to the panel, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear your version and your views on future of entertainment.
Great, very exciting to be here. So I've actually been involved with this industry for a couple of decades. So when I started, technology was mainframe and it was green screen. And those that were around during that time know exactly what I mean. And all of that has really changed in the last couple of years, brought to you by the ever popular Netflix. So they've changed it to an online subscription business, and they've also embraced technology. And so what I also see is that we have augmented reality and virtual reality, and that's really changing the industry. We don't have a lot of applicability to that right now in media and entertainment, but we definitely have it in social media with things like Facebook and the lenses, and you can have like characters. And then we also have it with games like Pokemon Go. So I think that there's an incredible opportunity for the media industry to really embrace augmented virtual reality. And we can have some very exciting experiences. So I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation, seeing where it goes, and talking more and more about this augmented reality, because that's what I'm really betting on for the future. So thank you, Sumit, and it's wonderful to be here today.
Great. The blurring lines between social media and entertainment. Thanks, Debbie, for sharing your thoughts and kicking start the panel discussion. Let's move to our next panelist now. My second panelist today is someone I have had the privilege to work very closely with, learn from him, and meet for coffees on early mornings talking about topics ranging from Bitcoin to blockchain, AI, ML to AR and VR. He's a Senior Vice President, Architecture and Engineering for Warner Music Group. He leads Warner Music Group's global technology and architecture strategy, design, and development efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Moin Haque. Moin, being at the forefront of the technology, we would love to hear your views on this topic of the day.
Thanks so much, Sumit. It's a pleasure to be here. And first off, I just want to wish everyone safety and health. Sincerely hope that everyone's doing well, keeping strong in what's been such a challenging and above all a shared experience for all of us. I've also had the equal pleasure of getting to know Sumit virtually. Someday, hopefully we'll get to meet in person. But this topic remains as exciting to me as it was nearly over 20 years ago when I first started in the media and entertainment space. I do remember those green screens and those mainframes, Debbie. I think we still have a few of those lying around. But throughout it all, the common theme has really been being bookended from creators and consumers. And I often go back to the actual definition of entertainment, which simply originates from the idea of this theme of holding together or supporting, providing, engaging, and sometimes diverting. But what it speaks to is experiences and relationships. And what I'm really excited about the future in this space, especially through the advent of what we're seeing in technology, is that we're going to continue to marshal opportunities and innovations that really help keep these relationships and experiences dynamic and responsive. It's something we're starting to see day to day in the work we do, both at Warner Music and through our partners in the landscape, and really excited to have this discussion today. So thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Moin. Green screens and mainframes and experiences and relationships. Indeed, you summed it up very nicely. Thank you again, Moin, for your technology-powered views on entertaining future. Moving on to our third panelist. They say 10,000 hours is a passé now. You need 20 plus years on a subject to be a thought leader. With that yardstick, our next panelist has been a leading executive and strategic advisor in the media business for over 20 plus years, working with traditional and digital media companies, brands, agencies, and tech firms with a focus on driving revenue growth and strategic partnerships for clients such as the Walt Disney Company, Comcast NBCU, Fox Television, the Motion Pictures Association, the Association of National Advertisers, and many others. He's also a weekly contributor to Forbes on Forbes.com on media, advertising, and entertainment, and also an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. If there's one guy who's done it all in his 20 plus years in our M&E world, it is none other than Howard Harmanoff himself. Welcome, Howard, to the panel.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I almost thought it would take me 20 years to read your accomplishments, Howard.
But I'm pumped, so.
Your views on the future of entertainment will be etched in the future for at least 20 plus years now. I'm sure audience would love to hear your perspectives.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that there has been such an incredible dynamic change in technology over the course of the last decade plus, and you can start wherever you want, at the beginning of the internet or the beginning of streaming with Netflix or Hulu or wherever you may want to land as a starting point. But the technology developments and innovations, I think, remain very far ahead of where the business models are or are going to end up. And which are very much in their infancy, and I think will be in a state of flux for some time. And you know, for years, for those of us, and I grew up in the cable and broadcasting business more than anything else, and for the longest time, we were hearing, when is that tipping point going to come? You know, when is it going to be that wanted time where things have really changed and the business is a different one? And I think you don't hear about the tipping point anymore. We're either, if we haven't finished tipping, we're in the midst of the tipping. And it reminds me a little bit of, if any of you are fans of Christopher Nolan's movies, the movie Inception, where, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler alert, at the end, there's a top that is just spinning and spinning and spinning. And we don't know where, when, or if it will land. And what that means is we don't know, in that case, if we are in reality or in a dream. And now we're sort of, you know, that spinning is, we don't know where the top is going to land in terms of the business model or those business models that really are going to predominate. And I think one of the things we'll talk about today is, and again, if you've been in the business for a number of years, you see that the business models were so etched in stone almost, and so predictable for so long, whether it was in music, and Moyne will know this better than I do, but for years that business was move units, whether it was vinyl or cassettes or CDs, move units, and that's how you measured success. Motion pictures were get that big opening weekend number, and that really determines the value of that motion picture across syndication streams all the way down the line, cable and broadcasting, where if you could get your new network launched in a few key cable operators, then you knew for years you were going to continue to grow subs, continue to grow audience, continue to grow ad revenues. And those were, you know, an incredible benefit from a financial perspective for Wall Street to know with some predictability what your business was going to look like. And it was a great place to be working because you kind of knew how to do things. And on each of those fronts, and every attendant front, all of those models have this, they don't no longer exist, but they are all now faced with enormous, you know, sieges on every front. And how that's going to land, sort of what the experiments are now, and where we think that's going to go is obviously, there's a lot of the stuff we'll talk about today.
Indeed, in the midst of the tipping point, as you rightly said, Howard, and thank you for sharing your views on this. Given that we're at the topic now, it will be great for me to start with you, if that's okay, talking about the new business models in our M&E world now. Ned was kind enough to name today's day as not the Tuesday, but Future of Entertainment Day. I'm going to remember that now, Ned. So on this Future of Entertainment Day, talk to us, Howard, on what do you think are the new business models in our M&E industry? What are your views on these different models? You talked about few of these as the midst of the tipping point, but do you think some of them are going to stay? And if yes, then which one of these are temporary or permanent?
Well, I think that, you know, I'm a big believer in evolution and adaptation in our business more than sort of beginnings and endings necessarily. And I think that's true of both of technology, you know, kind of surprisingly, and business models. And so I recall I began my career on Capitol Hill, and I was counsel for the committee that oversaw the media and entertainment business. And I recall a hearing years ago where we had the three presidents then of the major networks, and you didn't even include Rupert Murdoch, which will date myself to show you, you know, how long ago this was, in the room at the same time. But there was one of the members of our committee looking at these three hugely powerful executives and said, I feel like I'm looking at dinosaurs arguing over their feeding ground. And here we are decades later, and those businesses, they all exist. They're very different and faced with enormous challenges, but we still have broadcast television, we still have cable television, we still have radio, you know, 90 years later, despite all of the changes that have come about in the business. So I think it's more, you know, not pure replacement, but evolutionary. And I think it is, again, sort of, if I'll use the cable industry as a little bit of a lightning rod here, that's a business which had years and years of success in its business model because it had the kind of holy grail of a dual revenue stream. You had both the subscribers paying directly for the product. They paid their cable operator. The cable operator in turn paid money from that to their suppliers of content. And that was a predictable monthly stream of revenue coming into everyone involved. And at the same time, you had advertisers, marketers contributing their advertising revenues. And so you had, and it was a very symbiotic relationship. And I think still, however you can fit, you divvy it up now, and there are different players and there are different intermediaries, and sometimes there aren't any intermediaries, and in that direct-to-consumer world. Nevertheless, you're still, I think, in that hunt, if you can get it right, for finding the subscribers to make a contribution and for your advertisers to make a contribution. And we're seeing, we have, you know, a couple of examples of folks who don't seem to need advertising. Disney Plus today obviously depends on its subscribers with no advertising revenue. Netflix has no advertising revenue. But I think over time, you're going to see those places too have a pressure as they get to certain points. We haven't hit that yet, where there's no, you know, the growth will slow down in subscribers and they're looking elsewhere. There are advertiser supported services, free AVOD, and you'll know some of these names as kind of the alphabet soup of Tubi and Fubo and Zumo, not Fubo in terms of this category, but Tubi and Zumo and Philo, among others, which are entirely supported by advertising without subscribers paying anything. But they too will find a point, I think, in which maybe they create a premium tier, maybe they create a different kind of content relationship where they're looking for some kind of a subscriber revenue stream. So, however, I don't think this will shake out in a way in which we say, like with cable or like music, this is the answer. I think it will be many answers, and many people are going to experiment before they land on exactly the right one for their content or their network or their studio or their platform.
Indeed, Howard, and we saw the same trends on the social media side when Facebook videos first came out, and then now we all know how that goes. If I can move to you, Moin, IT clearly is no longer the back office for our industry now. As you lead the technology in the front office, what new business models do you see coupled with these technological advancements?
Sure. That's a great question, and I think there's several models that continue to evolve. To follow up on Howard's point, we're seeing more recently a lot of inspiration and somewhat perspiration from this exogenous impact of the pandemic on some of our traditional means. But the key pivot seems to be moving towards the use of technology as a differentiator and not just being sort of something that you went to afterwards to facilitate. Or focus on undifferentiated services. And as with most businesses, you're really part of a much larger ecosystem. And this is very pronounced in the media and entertainment space, because you're not just sort of alone. There's a large supply chain of relationships out there. So we're seeing a trajectory towards leveraging that technology and the data associated with it towards scaling these various relationships between our partners, vendors, as well as our creators and consumers. It's what's helping us from a technology perspective. It's helping us contextualize and bring texture to our products and services, as well as extend these experiences beyond what used to be our traditional patterns or platforms. The content itself is what we're seeing is somewhat becoming more and more multi-platform. What's happening is you've got an audience that's more and more comprised of digital natives, and this same audience is becoming more and more sort of digitally ambidextrous, if you will. And so when you have this fragmentation of consumption, it warrants greater capacity and capabilities to be able to meet those audiences, not just everywhere they are, but somewhat every when that they are as well. And that's where we're seeing a lot of focus in bringing technology to the forefront. We're seeing new ways to create content and new platforms on which to consume them. Think of your fitness and gaming experiences without the advent of music, not just as background music, but being contextual and relevant to the experience you're having. And similar to tech, we're seeing the same critical need for data itself as a currency, not just within the enterprise, which is a challenge in itself, but across the landscape and ecosystem. And as a result, the importance we're seeing is of marketplaces and exchanges starting to grow, because data both fuels these opportunities, but it also helps eliminate the latencies that have often plagued our ability to scale and be responsive. So what I'd say is, we're looking to use technology in a differentiated manner, contextualize, add context and texture, but think of it much like data. Think of it as a verb, where you're as much a media and entertainment company as you are a data company and a technology company.
Wonderfully put, Moin. Data as the currency across all these sub-verticals within the media and entertainment world, and tech as the differentiator. Thank you for sharing your views. I wouldn't want to move away to a different question unless I talk to Deborah about the role that you play, Deborah, especially collaborating with the partner ecosystem. What's your perspective on this?
Yep. So I work across multiple subsectors. So sports companies, publishing, media companies, the various companies we've mentioned here. And I think that we still have a ways to go with some of these companies. So whereas we've embraced some aspect of technology, I still think we think of it too much as back office and trying to keep the costs down. And we really need to think about it as more of a strategic driver. And I think those that can really embrace strategy or technology as part of their strategy are going to be part of the winning formula. And then Moin hit on this as well. Many of these traditional media companies, they were B2B businesses. They were not D2C. So in the last couple of years, everybody's shifted to this online subscription, and now I've got consumer data. And so yes, we have demographics, but how about taking that data a step further, right? And you have the niche super fans. So for example, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I would love to have some kind of augmented virtual reality experience where I'm sitting in the Shire and I'm having breakfast with Frodo, and maybe he's fueled by some kind of AI engine, and we're having a conversation about Gandalf and their wonderful adventures. So call me crazy, but I'd be willing to bet that there's people out there that love Lord of the Rings as much as I do. So I think that there's endless application. I think there's also, though, the concept of rights. And I know Howard, as a lawyer, you know, this would be near and dear to his heart, right? So I might license the right to TV or movies, but do I have the right to license that same brand to create, like, you know, some kind of experience around Frodo, just as an example? So I do think in order for that collaboration and the full user experience to come about, we've got to get kind of that right situated as well, because everyone's going to want a piece of it. We're all in business. And so I think if we can get all of that right, embrace technology as a key strategic driver, start to harness the power of the data, and then figure out ways to collaborate so that everybody wins on the right situation, I think those are going to be the companies that are best poised for the future.
Well, Howard, I guess thanks to Deborah and Moen, now we know that the tech and data through partners can be fed to those dinosaurs, and everyone will be happy in the new world. Yeah?
We also discovered that Debbie is a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I think now she's out of the closet on that one. So,
all right, let's change gears and quickly talk about media companies to be the next tech giants. We all have talked enough about many new technology first companies to be the media moguls in the times to come. Netflix was just one example. What do you think, Howard, if I can start with you, must media companies also be the tech companies in order to compete with these new technology-led businesses? And if you could also throw some light on where do you draw the line between new business models and the tech realm?
Well, I think that, and Moin, you know, very much spoke to this too, in terms of the centrality in you know, he's Warner Music Group, but the centrality of technology and data in everything that they're doing. And it reminds me, in fact, of, and I'll tie it to Debbie's mention of rights, in fact, which is interesting, that we've seen this explosion in the last year or, you know, roughly, in the music publishing world, where many of our most beloved artists, Bob Dylan, Paul Simon, and so many others, who have taken their catalogs and sold them now to large either existing music companies, or there's people that are specifically sort of focused on, in a more startup way, on accumulating digital music publishing rights. And what that's about is not simply, oh, I'm now the owner of this media property, but it's very much, I think, going to be a story about how new technology, AI, et cetera, very specific nuggets of data from, you know, from the music industry can be used to create new products, take this music and bring it into new venues, new potential partnerships. And so I think that is a prime example of really a whole sector of blending the media, the content, with the technology. And I think, you know, most recently, another example, most recently, as I virtually attended, NBC Universal held what they called their first developer conference, called it 121. And many of us in the business are familiar with the upfronts, where networks trot out all their most glamorous stars and funniest comedians and Olympic athletes, or whatever it may be, and tell you what's coming up on their programming agenda, aimed at the advertisers. Well, this was very much aimed at what are the technology advances taking place inside of NBCU, inside of the business, which are going to facilitate more productive working relationships for, in this case, NBCU, with Facebook, Instagram, and a series of advertiser marketer partners. And I think that to be a media company going forward is, you know, demands not necessarily that you are the developer of proprietary technology that at the very cutting edge that no one else has ever seen before, a la Google or others, smaller companies focused on R&D, but that you're a company that really knows how to apply technology, integrate it, work well, as I've said, sort of not just create new toys, but learn how to play with the toys of others well and interact well. And that's going to be, I think, a great measurement of the success of a media company or any company, but certainly one that we're talking about in the media and entertainment space.
Very, very nicely put, Howard. The AI-powered digital rights can not only create new partnerships, but also new products. And if I can continue this chain of thoughts and come to you, Mo, and talk about AI, machine learning, blockchain, crypto, all these technologies have been known to our industry for a number of years. Yet the adoption that we saw last year in our entertainment world was breathtaking. What happened?
Sure. Yeah, no, great point. It really has been, just like several years ago, you couldn't get through a conversation or a presentation like this without hearing the word cloud or elasticity. Today's discussions, like anytime we have them, they're replete with references to AI, machine learning, and crypto. And I think much like the shift that we experienced with scalable compute and storage years ago, these technologies are enjoying the shift in the next level of what we're transcending. And that's essentially the network. We're finding ourselves moving in to essentially a spatially less restricted environment, somewhat dragged forward faster than we thought through the pandemic, but we're getting acclimated to working in distributed and hybrid models. And that would not have been easily envisioned just a few years ago. So when I think of AI today, it's basically just what we call narrow AI. It's really just machine learning, in that causation is still sort of that asymptote that we can't transcend, but it's sufficient enough to help drive forward a lot of the themes we've talked about around context and relevance, especially as we feed sort of this appetite of growing hyper-personalization that we're hearing from our consumers. Blockchain, on the other hand, I think has been more demonstrative of how its foundations of disintermediation align with this distributed and fragmented landscape. Going back to a previous point I made about data being a verb and the rise of exchanges and marketplaces, blockchain is actually a native approach in this scenario. And we're continuing to see the rise of its prevalence in how we interact with partners, creators, as well as consumers. Some of the other areas that are driving this adoption for us is the need for distributing trust in these environments. So we're seeing an increased rise in smart contracts around licensing, around metadata management, around discovery, and so much more of the complexity that's coming into the supply chain because of all these new types of products and engagements that we're seeing. This is also helping us a lot in the area of metadata. As we move away from the old models where everything is centralized inside companies and you're replicating data, you're processing it, you're repeating and rinsing this across the ecosystem, we're moving to a more shared and trusted exchange of metadata and assets. I think a great example of success in this is what we've seen in the fashion industry. You've seen a shift in how it's changing the relationship between creators and consumers, where I can pick up a piece of clothing and through something like blockchain have a trusted understanding of where it originated from. And that gives me a really strong sense of relationship and connection. And we're seeing that value come in this space. Now, while a lot of blockchain is still more of what you'd call the retail level today, I think the need to shift this more towards enterprises and institutions is increasing. And we're not going to be able to get through a day without more and more evidence of this growth.
Thank you for sharing that, Moin. I believe this conversation cannot be completed if we don't bring in the people angle into this, and who better than Deborah, who's such a people's person. Deborah, tell us, how do you bring the new technologies which are coming up every few years now to the creative directors, these VFX artists, and all the creative people around you all the time? How do you break it down for them?
And by the way, I pay Sumit to say these nice things about me. So it's constantly evolving, right? And we have pressures like none other right now in this industry. You guys all might have heard and read the article this morning about ArcLight, where that cinema chain is, going out of business. So we've had to morph and transform very, very quickly. And I really think it's all about the user experience. So it's all about creating these experiences for them and capitalizing on like that niche. So like We have some examples, so I mentioned, I think briefly before, Pokemon Go. That one is a augmented reality where you don't need a headset, you don't need special equipment, you just use your device and you kind of run around the cities catching monsters. We have an example of this with Harry Potter Wizards Unite, where you get to have your own wand and you get to interact with your favorite characters. I think the industry is going to move more and more towards that. So visual effects artists, producers, I think it's going to be about producing the user experience. So we're also going to be kind of sick to death of looking at these screens, and we're going to want to start to interact with our content and our characters in a different way. And so when you can get augmented reality, virtual reality, these kinks ironed out, you're going to have an easier way of interacting with this content. And that's where I think, again, the artists and the producers, the media companies backing this kind of initiatives is going to be the wave of the future. So I say when we hit 10 years from now, in 2031, we'll be fully interacting with our characters. We'll be immersed in these worlds. And I'd be willing to make some bets on that.
Well, Deborah, you've touched a chord with Nick Blake, who's asking a question. Which Lord of the Rings character do you identify with the most and why? I would recommend all of you please go and answer that if you could. But before I get into the last segment, in the interest of time, I do need to pick on an anonymous attendee who asked a great question. And if I can come to you, Howard, on this, where do you see the opportunities or underserved markets in our entertainment and media world?
Is that underserved from a geography perspective, or yeah? I mean, I think it's interesting, different. And I was involved years ago on behalf of a marketer. I remember looking to help them trying to figure out where and how with media they could market their message more effectively around the world, because the growth that they needed for the next decade was going to be more from around the world than it was from the US. And what was interesting is how differently in different parts of the world, even as technology changes, it doesn't change in every place at the same time in the same way. And so, many in Asia were well ahead of us, ahead of the US in terms of smartphone usage and than we were. And so I think you have to be prepared to sort of speak to people, reach people in different ways in different markets. So I recall, again, part of the same project years ago, learning that the Philippines, and I don't know that this is still the case, but the Philippines was at the time the greatest per capita use of texting of anywhere in the world. So that if you wanted to reach that marketplace in a saturated fashion, it wasn't mobile video, but it was actually through unique, clever texting messages. And so I guess my main point for whether you're the content provider, whether you're a marketer, whether you're a producer, that you've got to be prepared for kind of a multi-front strategy. You can't afford to simply say streaming is here, broadcast and cable are dead, they don't matter. Well, they matter enormously. We still got, we don't have 105 million multi-channel video homes, but we still have roughly 80 million plus. You can't write off, and in other parts of the world, you've got that changing dynamic. And as it's changing, you've got to keep your eyes on a multiplicity of different platforms to reach people in different places in different ways. I don't know if that gets at the questioner's question.
No, I think it's very nicely answered, Howard. Thanks for that. And again, in the interest of time, I would quickly go and pick up one more question from the audience. Mohan, this one's coming to you. Chris Ramanathan is asking, per Debbie's point, do you see M&E companies subsidizing new media hardware like VR HMDs in order to increase the adoption of cutting-edge new experiences? He's not really seen any such partnerships in the tech companies. Do you think it's too risky?
Sorry, just to understand that, you're saying the question's around whether we would subsidize
Yeah,
the hardware plays.
Media, hardware, software, in order to increase the adoption.
Yeah, I think it's not so much subsidizing the hardware, because again, like I was talking before, we want to focus on differentiation. I can't speak to what the investment choices are going to be tomorrow, but I think where we want to align with the new platforms is really making sure that we can marshal content that drives a very positive and valuable experience in those platforms, because the hardware can change and you can sort of get into an arms race going after hardware. But I think at a minimum to drive the ability that you have enough content to experience in those spaces. I think that was one of the initial challenges in the AR and VR space, is you didn't have the right content and it was so different. But to be able to actually take content you experience outside of those platforms and then be able to experience them again in these newer platforms, I think that's an area of investment that would be of value.
Hardware companies would really love your answer, Moin. You didn't subsidize them for Deborah. Thank you. This is the last segment. I know none of us have the crystal ball, else some of us at least wouldn't be here. But if we were to talk about the Netflix of the pandemic era, perhaps already born out there, what's your prophecy? If I could go around the table and ask each one of you, starting with Deborah, 2031 prophecy, looking back saying, I told you so moment, what would that be?
So what I've seen across a large number of my clients and companies I interact with, and some of it was actually pretty surprising, but in some ways not. Everybody has started to develop their content library. And so even, for example, theaters like AMC have created their own kind of streaming service, right? So the reality is we have too many of these streaming services. So we're going to start to see a consolidation. And I think there's challenges, right, with these content libraries, for example. So you could start off with this finite great library, but you have to constantly refresh that content. So everybody knew terms, especially during pandemic, binge watching, right? You'll watch like an entire season or even a couple of years in a weekend if you're really into it. So you have to constantly be refreshing this library. So I think we're going to see great consolidation. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of M&A, because you're going to be marrying up technology and content companies together. And those are basically my predictions. I think we're going to have a smaller number. We may still have more entrants for maybe even the next couple of years, but that's going to start to consolidate and whittle down. And then you're going to end up with big players that do become the Netflix of tomorrow, just accumulated a number of companies under that one brand. So that's my prediction, in addition to virtual augmented reality that I said earlier.
All right, super. Moin, how about you?
Yeah, it's one of those gotcha questions, right? I wish I knew yesterday what I know today. So for me, again, it goes back to getting at the core of what we mean by being in media and entertainment. Not so much defining ourselves by product or even by a given consumer, because like to Howard's point, a lot of those brands from decades ago, they survived longer than their actual original business models did. They've had to adapt, they've had to evolve. So I think it goes back to the idea of creating and providing experiences. As this digital intermediation continues, I think the content is going to become truly cross-platform. And I'm not talking about web or mobile, but cross-platform in the experience itself. That's going to be something to really look forward to in the coming years. Think of how Netflix and other streaming platforms completely changed the paradigm, 10 years ago, where you could extend the idea of relevance to now. And now think of envisioning that shift of relevance to how, because Netflix sort of brought us the idea that I can have this now. But I think 10 years from now, we're going to be having conversations that I can have this how. And that really leads to the idea of platform independent content, truly emotive experiences where me as a creator can focus on the emotions that I want to convey rather than the specific medium. You find yourself sometimes in a setting where humming a song is going to suffice to make the experience great. Or sometimes I'll want to watch a video or experience a music video, or want something more immersive versus just reading. Today, trying to do that kind of differentiation is very expensive and challenging, because each of those has to be its own product. But imagine innovating towards a point where the idea of being able to create these experiences dynamically, I think is going to be a major shift. I think of the idea years ago to telling someone, hey, you could marshal any song, any movie, any book, anywhere at any time. That would seem very distant and daunting to someone. But years from now, the idea is you can be engaged everywhere, every when, and every how. And I think that's going to be as feasible as dynamic streaming seems today. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. And I think those are the type of technologies and investments that are going to be really interesting.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing, Moin. How about your last comments on this?
Oh boy, lots are here. I think a couple of things. One, I would say that I would predict over the course of the next 10 years, there's a lot of reduction in the friction of going global that you still see as a streaming platform tries to expand itself today. It has a lot of challenges, and I mean, even if it's Disney Plus and Netflix, etc., from rights management to technology, Wi-Fi issues to hardware issues, etc., as it expands globally. And I think that is a friction that will be reduced over time, and making it easier to expand for whatever the service is on a more global basis. I think that around content, my prediction actually is that a lot of the content that we all enjoy today is going to be the content that we enjoy in 10 years. I think if you look at the market of, look at the TV, wherever you watch your TV, and the kinds of content that dominates today. Sitcoms. Well, we've had sitcoms since radio comedies with Jack Benny and Fred Allen, and not too many people probably even know those names anymore, from the 1930s and 40s. Reality television. Well, there were shows like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and You Bet Your Life in the 1950s. News shows, sports, dramas have been around for decades and continue to be the foundation of whether it's Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu and many others today. So I think that there are enduring forms of content and storytelling that are still going to endure in 10 years. I think that I agree very much with Debbie on the consolidation point. We're at a point today where the barriers to entry for a lot of the newer streaming platforms, for example, are very easy. That you can go on Roku today and find in the range of 10,000 different connected TV apps from which to choose from. Well, there aren't 10,000 successful connected TV app businesses. And so over time, many of those will either go away. Many, if they're low cost, will continue, just as anyone can still have a website today at a very low cost. But whether they will be a real business and either joining with others or purchased by bigger entities, I think is their likelier path to business success in the future.
Well, clearly we don't have to wait 10 years to see the future of entertainment, but just watch our panelists. Tuesdays will remind me of future for entertainment every time, each time. I thank you, Howard, Moin, and Deborah, for your amazing insights, and I turn it back over to Ned.
Thank you, Sumit. Really enjoyed the panel today. If you don't mind, I'm going to add my own prediction too. And it plays off of a lot of what you all were discussing as well as what we'll be talking about tomorrow. And that is, I think we're seeing tools from the game industry being inserted into the entertainment industry in new and dynamic ways. And I see a real future for more creator tools that will continue to democratize the ability to create music, video, games for users all across the world. And then the ability to take those tools and put them into experiences, whether they're metaverses or games or video-centric experiences that leverage highly produced IP. So I think it's really an exciting time to watch these developments. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Sumit. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Moin. And thanks to our friends at Grant Thornton